It's easy to look back at nuclear detonations and only give attention to this. Simple destruction. Just fake balsa wood houses being turned into dust, without context or consequence. It's easy to get lost in the power and spectacle. It's easy to think that the fake houses and scorched lands are just placeholders. Your town here. But the story of the land these tests were conducted on, and who owns it, is far more important than any one of these fireballs. And this land isn't in some faraway desert. They're just an hour drive away from our homes. This land, just an hour drive from my house, is the nuke capital of the world. No place on Earth has seen as many nuclear detonations as this stretch of desert. The history of nuclear tests starts with the first atomic bomb, the Trinity test in the Jornada del Muerto desert in New Mexico. Realizing that the weapon they created was more powerful than a skyscraper worth of conventional explosives, the US government wanted a permanent location for nuclear tests. First, they tried small islands in the Pacific, namely Bikini Atoll.
How many nuclear tests were conducted on U.S. soil?
A little over 1,000.
In the process, the inhabitants who voluntarily left their island for these nuclear tests found their home too radioactive to be habitable. Following the figurative and literal fallout of nuclear tests, the federal government was eager to locate a permanent area within the continental US where testing nuclear weapons could be handled much more reliably.
They used Bikini and numerous islands in the Marshall Islands extensively to test nuclear weapons after the end of the Second World War. They didn't understand what was happening was that when they exploded that bomb, it brought up all this vaporized coral and sand that attached to the radionuclides and then came back down on the ships and made them highly radioactive. They didn't understand that for a few days. They actually had to cancel the rest of the operation, and it somewhat ended in disaster.
So now, a newly formed civilian agency named the Atomic Energy Commission was tasked with finding a new testing site. According to Director Hall, what the federal government wanted more than anything else was a land that was remote.
They exploded the first atomic bomb in New Mexico in 1945, but New Mexico wasn't a really good place to test nuclear weapons. It's not as remote as you would think it would be. And they chose one of the most remote places in the entire country, and that was a large piece of government land out here in Nevada. At the time, there was nothing in the area except a teeny tiny little town called Las Vegas, Nevada. About 21,000 people. It was about 60 miles to the south. And it was the perfect place to test nuclear weapons because it was in the middle of nowhere.
Director Hall is right. In the memo from the Department of Energy, the land that will become the test site is described as sparsely populated, remote, with few areas of the continental United States being more ruggedly severe, and as inhospitable to humans as this portion of land. With the land already a federal bombing range, the transition was simple enough. From that point on, the Nevada test site became the hub for nuclear detonations. No other testing location would come close to being as prolific as the Nevada test site. Now, what did Vegas make of all this? Surely America's playground didn't like the idea of a mushroom cloud, an omen of the apocalypse, existing over their workplace and schools, right?
Exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay.
Yep.
In the early days, it was really a very patriotic, supportive spirit here in Las Vegas. Of course, Las Vegas was very small and struggling, and they were, had high hopes for the future. In fact, some of the early nuclear tests, the amazing mushroom clouds in the sky, actually they wanted to capitalize that, and they convinced the Atomic Energy Commission at the time to actually announce when they would do tests, and it initially helped tourism to some extent. nuclear power, atomic bombs. We were proud of that. It was part of our national identity.
The citizens of Las Vegas weren't just accepting of the program, they were proud of it, and more than willing to sell it to tourists. The mushroom cloud became synonymous with hairdos, cocktails, postcards, and swimwear. Hell, Clark County put one of them in their seal.
It was a different age. I mean, we, in the 21st century, can look back and say, well, those people were crazy. But back in the day, they were patriotic. This was the Cold War. It was an entirely different mindset.
Parties will rage all night and conclude by watching an early morning flash of a nuclear bomb just 60 miles to the north. So, if the land was truly barren and remote, and the one major population center nearby was more than supportive, why did the testing stop? What went wrong? Nevada's close relationship with nuclear testing started to fall out in 1953 when a nuclear bomb, nicknamed Harry, didn't go as planned. Dirty Harry, as it will later be known, created the most radioactive fallout of any known nuclear test. Director Hall states that the payload of the explosion was far greater than expected, which kicked up dust and debris and sucked it into the mushroom cloud. The dust, combined with a sudden change of winds, sent a radioactive cloud east, where the fallout particles rained down on a large portion of the continental United States, especially in a town called St. George.
They are known for some of the worst fallout from the atmospheric test that occurred here in Nevada. That's where the radioactivity went. It didn't stay locally here too much. It went with the prevailing winds towards Utah and Arizona.
A study found that compared to other small towns, St. George had 3 to 5 times the rates of cancers like leukemia, lymphoma, and melanoma. Because of the wind direction, the most vocal critics of nuclear testing, spare one, came from Arizona and Utah, who received the blunt of the fallout. There have been over 500 nuclear protests, which were held at the gates of the Nevada test site, including after a treaty that banned nuclear testing in 1993. A common side was the symbolic trespassing, where protesters crossed over into the test site land. Wait, whose land?
We haven't given our land away. We haven't given anything that the people say we lost our land. We always say that we always own the land, and because of the Treaty of 1863, we still have the title to it.
That's Johnnie Bob, Chief Counsel of the Western Shoshone Tribe, and that treaty he's referring to is the Treaty of the Ruby Valley. The treaty states that the US government does not own the land, but instead that the government has the right to traverse the land and build certain infrastructure, such as railroads and power lines. Predictably, the United States didn't abide by the treaty for starters. The treaty was signed under coercion, as Chief Counsel Bob explained.
2 of our younger men, and they had them killed, and they kept them in there until we decided that we should sign a paper, because we didn't know what they're going to do. We didn't know if they're going to kill some of our women, some of our men, or some of our children. So they were forced to sign that paper.
According to Chief Bob, even though most of the native signatories weren't present, the tribal leaders that were present signed anyway, out of fear of more violence. And even though the treaty specifically said that the Shoshone owned the land, the United States and white settlers simply acted as if it was, including turning the Shoshone homelands into a bombing range, and later, a literal wasteland of nuclear craters.
It's contaminating our water, contaminating our air, contaminating our Mother Earth. They cannot pay us enough money to bring that back. They can't pay us enough money to make everything better. They can't pay us enough of everything that we went through, pain, brokenhearted, and raping our women, and killing our people, to hurt us like cattle. So this is all something that our government did, and they can't pay enough for the damage.
In late May of 2020, the Washington Post reported that the Trump administration was seeking to restart the nuclear weapons testing program, amid claims that Russia and China are restarting their nuclear testing programs. Although the government signed a treaty banning any nuclear tests, it was never ratified by the US, and even if it was, tribal groups like the Western Shoshone have a long and painful history of treaties not being upheld. If testing came back, it would be underground, since the United States did ratify a treaty banning nuclear tests in the atmosphere. And it's not quite clear that real-world detonations in this age of computers are necessary.
In an advanced country, again, an advanced country like America or Russia, the computer modeling is so advanced. I mean, the leading physicists around the country, and I'm sure they're telling this to the president and other leaders, you don't need to blow a nuclear weapon up to learn how it works. You can do stuff with artificial intelligence, advanced computer modeling. That's what I hear.
In June of 2020, Las Vegas Congresswoman Dina Titus introduced the Planet Act. The act could codify into law that weapons testing in the Nevada test site needs congressional approval. To make sure kids grow in a safe and healthy world, we are encouraging everyone to reach out to their members of Congress and demand that they take decisive action, so that we may never see mushroom clouds in our backyards again. When we reached out to Dina Titus, sponsor of the Planet Act, here's what she had to say.
Hello, I'm your Congresswoman Dina Titus, representing Nevada's 1st District, which includes the heart of the Las Vegas Valley. I want to thank the Nevada Conservation League and Western Shoshone leader Johnnie Bob for hosting today's event to educate Nevadans on the history of nuclear testing and the harm that resuming this testing would bring to people and our environment. Prior to serving in Congress, I was a professor of political science at UNLV. A major focus of my academic research was on the history and politics of atomic testing, which occurred at the Nevada test site some 65 miles north of the campus. From 1951 to 1992, there were hundreds of atmospheric and underground atomic weapons tests here in the Nevada desert. Many brave cold warriors put their lives on the line to protect our national security. Since then, we've learned that the exposure of test site workers, soldiers, and downwinders to radioactive fallout from these blasts caused a number of cancers and other diseases. The U.S. government has finally compensated some of these participants, and it now certifies that the weapons stockpile is safe and secure through subcritical testing. Recently, however, President Trump, playing the strong man, has suggested restarting nuclear tests, once again putting Nevadans in harm's way for an unjustified experiment that would make our country less secure. Being tough on Russia and China means ensuring that the global moratorium on explosive nuclear weapons testing remains in place, not giving them a license to detonate. That's why I introduced the Planet Act, to prohibit the use of funds to prepare for or to conduct an explosive nuclear test that produces any yield. Earlier this week, that bill moved out of the House Appropriations Committee. Senator Markey has introduced a companion bill. So I would ask that you work with me to pass this legislation and mandate that no federal funds may be used for this dangerous experiment that would needlessly put Nevadans and all Americans in danger, contaminate the environment, and restart the arms race. Thank you again for having me at today's important event, and I encourage you all to keep up the good work to protect Nevada. And in your spare time, you may want to read my book on the subject, Bombs in the Backyard.
Is the bomb going off over there, though?
It would be behind us, but still, all the radiation releases all the people, all the dust falls on these guys.
It's just like the dinosaurs.
Yeah, it falls in their water, on their food, in the air they breathe. They end up getting cancer, dying.
Tell me when to stop.
That's good.
Static noise.
All right. So, thank you everybody for joining our live video and discussion on the Nevada test site. On the phone with us today, we have the Chief Johnnie Bob, the Chief Counsel of the Western Shoshone Nation. I'm with me as well as Scott Egnor. He's our co-creator on this project. We worked really hard meeting with the director, Michael Hall of the Atomic Testing Museum, reaching out to our Congresswoman, Dina Titus, and all the hard work that she's been doing on this issue. And we were very fortunate to have an interview with Chief Counsel of the Western Shoshone, Johnnie Bob, and he's here with us right now. Do you want to say hello and introduce yourself real quick?
Hello.
Thank you for coming on and making time for us today. Now, I know that there's a lot of information that we just gave everybody, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Western Shoshone Nation and the Treaty of Ruby Valley of 1863. And I'm glad that you came on here to talk a little bit about it. So, jumping right in, every year the Western Shoshone Nation hosts an annual event. It's the Peaceful Walk Run, and you guys make a 4-day journey, I believe, to the test site from Las Vegas. Could you tell us a little bit about this event that you do and the cultural significance of it?
Yes. What happened was when Corbin Harney was doing the spiritual thing on Nevada test site with a big gathering over at Mercury, I decided to ask the Western Shoshone National Council if we could do a walk and run from Mercury all the way to Nevada test site and meet with Corbin Harney over at Mercury. But what we did was it wasn't protesting that we were doing. We were doing a lot of praying and setting up our camps and getting together with the elders and children and that's the things that happen with our culture. We have a way of our own spiritual way of connecting with our Mother Earth. So everything that we did was praying for our Mother Earth by setting willows on the side of the road. When we pray for that willow, we dig a hole and we put the willows in with the water and a little bit of offering tobacco and whatever else. And we went on maybe at least 70 or 80 willows be planted all the way from Warm Springs. They'll be east of Tonopah where we start. When do you usually? We usually do it in May, 5 days before Mother's Day. Sometimes we do it earlier now because of more people coming in. So that way we have time to tie up the walk and run to do sweats and more praying and more sweats before we start. And we do that up there at Yamba Shoshone Indian tribe. And also it's called Reese River Valley, south of Austin, Nevada. And it's very important that we start off with our traditional ceremony and the groups that's there that do planning for next year and talk about other things that happening around this area, on the treaty land, on the native issues, and a lot of other things that we always discuss. And then we pray for it. And we're continuing our journey down the road over to Mercury. And we camp out.
Oh no, go ahead, continue.
And then we camp out on the side of the road, on the right side going towards Tonopah. And every 30 miles or 35 miles we camp and put up our cook tent and teepee. When we put up our teepee, we let people know that we are still on the road. We are natives. we will continuing our praying and getting together with other natives that stops by and non-natives that want to ask questions or have them give us donations if they want to accept that. If we accept that, and everything, it goes fine. It's really very interesting in younger ones because they like that prayer, and they like putting up the teepees, and they like the food, and they like people stopping by, and they put up the signs, and we put up our flags. So we all enjoy our stay every 30 miles or so. So we're continuing on this for a long time, since 2000. From 2000, we had that 4 year of talk with our own Shoshone people to invite everybody and how to manage the walk and run. So we've been doing pretty good. And Corbin Harney, the spiritual person that took care of that test site over at Mercury, was pleased with what we were doing, and the council too.
So it sounds like, and I'm just listening now, this is more of a celebration of cultural heritage and a reconnection with nature and the environment. And the protest is just a side note, but the real importance of this event appears to be the cultural heritage that you guys are expressing and exercising. And I think that's important for a lot of people to understand about that event.
Yes. Our culture is very important because, this place of our Mother Earth needs our prayer, needs our songs, needs our footsteps, needs kids and people out there singing their songs and yelling around and enjoying our stay every 30 miles that we do walk and run. And also, the important thing about that is planting our willows and putting rocks around the willows, so that way we understand that our Native people, it's our tradition. And when we put rocks around the willow, it gives us more good feeling that we are still working, putting rocks around the willows, like planting our willow. Long time ago, Grandma and Grandpa, they was plant seed, and they still do. And we plant potato, we plant corns, and all natives, they do other things like that too, to bring up their food and stuff like that. But it's very important to learn all these things that need to be taught to the younger ones.
Absolutely, and it sounds like a really special event. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Treaty of Ruby Valley. A little bit of good news just came out of Oklahoma. The Supreme Court decided that they were going to support the treaty that was signed, giving back land to indigenous peoples. This sounds a lot like something we can look forward to here in Nevada. Does the Western Shoshone Nation, are you guys excited at all about the prospect of re-looking at this treaty and having the government stand by it?
What I heard was that we knew that was going to happen. The treaty is very important to our people. We still haven't given up our land. We haven't given up anything. And it's the same way with other nations of Native people out there, that we, as the Native people, we haven't vanished. We haven't gone away. We're still here on Mother Earth protecting it. No matter what kind of spiritual meanings that we do for our gatherings and political things that happens with our non-natives that understand our ways and feelings to them, You know, we still continuing and teaching our children all the facts about life and water and plants, water and our animals out there. And it's very important that we're continuing on this thing.
So for you guys, this issue has always been at the forefront. But for a lot of America, we're just now starting to realize what these treaties mean and the effects they've had on indigenous communities. Thank you for sharing that. Lastly,
okay.
One of the reasons why we made this video was in response to Donald Trump's administration. The Washington Post reported that he was considering restarting tests out here at the Nevada test site. Now, us in Nevada, we oppose any testing, and luckily one of our congressional leaders, our great congressional leaders, Dina Titus, wrote the Planet Act, which would reduce funding or require congressional approval for funding for all future atomic testing and nuclear testing. Is that something you're excited about? Would you like to see the Planet Act get voted on, and how does that feel for you guys? Sorry, let me reform the question. With the
okay, we got it.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
No problem.
Before the Planet Act, congressional approval required to start any type of nuclear testing.
We don't want it.
Well, doesn't say that. Say exactly that.
We don't want it?
Right.
Yeah, we don't want it. We just want them to not to bring shipments of radioactive waste to Yucca Mountain. We want them to keep it in their backyard. And that's it.
Absolutely.
And no more testing. No more testing.
And anything...
That one,
Oh, go ahead, Mary Lou.
Tyler, that one I had to jump in on a little bit because we didn't have the detail in front of us. Yeah, he says we don't want it. Obviously, we do want the Planet Act to go into effect immediately.
Yeah.
And at a minimum, have required congressional approval before any testing is done. Of course. I mean, this is their treaty land, right? And people still live on it, families still live on it, and plants and animals and water and flora and fauna and spirit and teachings and petroglyphs and drawings and art and all that stuff. So no testing. Yes to the act.
Yes, and luckily for us, we've seen a lot of movement on these issues, and we're going to keep fighting alongside you and our partners as well. I did want to make a quick mention that down in the comments, I believe we have a link to a GoFundMe to help out with the annual walk and run. So individuals who are interested in learning more, contributing to this amazing event, please check out the comments, and I look forward to seeing you at the annual walk run.
Yes.
Now, thank you so much for being on with us and taking the time out of your day. And thank you everybody who's watching at home. Please share this video with your family and friends, and we have a lot more interesting stuff coming up for you next week, so stay tuned to our Facebook.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Any blessings.
Bye.
Bye.